Hello and welcome to this video. This is coverage for round 7 of the London Chess Classic. A little bit late that video, but I'm glad that I managed to do it in the first place because I am really busy this weekend and well, normally speaking I shouldn't even done the video, but okay, here I am. I want to keep coverage complete. Round 7 was a very interesting round. And one reason why I'm so busy this weekend is because I had something to do on Friday that was not planned at all. I was the replacement for Grandmaster Larry Christiansen doing live commentary for the ICC again. So I was live for 7 hours for that round together with Grandmaster Alex Yarmolinsky filling in for Larry. It was a great experience. We had lots of fun, and it was very good learning experience for, I think, both the audience and also for me in some cases, with Yarmo being an excellent endgame expert. So let's see what we had in this round. So it's not the coverage that I would love to do. It's not as deep as it could be, but it's what I can do. So please be be aware that I had little time to do this. So we have a trump in this game. Caruana Giri. What a trump. Yes, this is still an opening. And why not? I mean, in those Berlin defenses, Giri is probably just repeating some kind of prep for 25 moves and will draw. So why not the trump? But we see here with Giri's time spent, he played quickly. Very interesting line. Black gives up the center here for the moment, or let's say he gives up that pawn and allows white to take, and he's not getting the pawn back just yet. With b4, white is trying to keep it. Quite an interesting approach, but after e6, b4, a5, we see that black is immediately trying to fight against this bind on the queen side. And it's difficult for white to keep it. If you go bishop b5, a move that I suggested during the broadcast, just bishop d7 is probably okay for black. Black always has ideas to break the thing up with b6. For example, like here, takes and b6. Note that black has the total bishop pair here. That is quite two bishops against two knights. Black is definitely alright here. Yeah, this was played by Caruana, and now Giri went f5. Now first spending some time, and he got this bishop on the long diagonal. Very nice. b5 now by Caruana. This is a good practical decision. I think he will lose the pawn back, and this will be the c5 pawn. But in the process, at least black has to lose some time by putting his knight back. It went back to make sure that this pawn is actually falling on c5. And in the meantime, white got some things coordinated. c6 here, takes, and again back to b8. Very funny what Giri did here with his knight. We expected in the broadcast that knight c5 would be played, but after queen a3, queen d6, there is the move c4. And here white is definitely not worse, intending to capture. Note that white has just covered this. Here, I think white is probably better. This is where Giri went back to b8, and now he will get the pawn back on c6. In the meantime, however, white gets some coordination going. Especially important is that he gets in c4. Yeah, and Giri now just played very cool-headed, sensible approach, knight to e7. And here, white has to be alert about the bishop pair. If he is not playing as actively as possible with his better mobilization of forces, he will be worse against the bishop. So he opens up the position and tries to play with tempi, like here, attacking the knight, getting this in, trying to get rook b1 in. So white has the better activity, but black has the long-term ideas with the two bishops. In the game, this proved to be completely equal on tactical terms. Like here, rook dc8 is a very good defense, leading to this kind of simplification. And black is just about in time. He's covering the a5 pawn and has counter-attacking ideas with bishop d5 against the a pawn. Here we go. And this is how the game now ended. They traded the a pawn and here agreed to a draw. Not a super exciting game, but it had some content, and the main reason why I'm not looking at this a little bit more, it was possible, is besides the time constraint, is that the other games are far more interesting. So this is just a short coverage of that game. Okay, let's go to the next one. Yeah, Adams Grishuk. Both players having a very solid tournament. Grishuk is on +1, having beaten Arnold and draws. And Adams is Mr. Draw himself. He has played draws exclusively. 6 out of... No, this is round 7. That's round 6 out of 6 for round 7. Okay, I'm getting confused. So he played all draws. And, well, if I'm doing this game now, you probably have the suspicion that this is going to end in a draw as well. And yeah, I'm going to tell you right away, it will be. It will be end in a draw. Okay, so Adams went for a g3 line against the Najdorf, and Grishuk went for a dragon type of formation. Why not? All super solid. There's just one particular thing of interest here, knight d5. That was played by Adams. The idea is that the knight on d5 is tough to tolerate for a very long time. And after a pawn gets to d5, this is what happens shortly. White has some ideas to play on the half-open e-file, maybe against that e7 pawn. Currently, the e-file is sort of plugged by the bishop on e3 and the knight on e5, but this is a long-term plan. And black has to be pretty circumspect not to allow this kind of scenario to happen. You absolutely have to make sure that white is not getting all this in. And Grishuk is doing a good job. He activates his knight and his queen. And it's difficult now. One thing that white would love to do is to play b3 and c4. But if he goes b3, he's blundering the game. This is what Adams tries to prepare now with his rook a2 move. Now b3 is an option. But Grishuk played in a very aggressive way. He went b5. That's an interesting possibility. Immediately using the fact that this rook is unprotected, so white cannot capture on b5. First glance, that move b5 looked a bit suspicious because of knight c6. Yeah, that knight entering black's position. But black can just take and go e6. That's a very important resource. Black is going for d5. And after d5, that c6 pawn is kind of isolated from the rest of white's army and will get lost. Yeah, not for nothing, but it is something that might happen. Yeah, here d5 was no good because of the tactic. Yeah, e takes.
Check. Check.
And that's going to be mate. So no d5, please. But Grishuk is, of course, not falling into that. Knight to e5. Back. And he got that one back. Yeah, b5 was falling, c6 was falling. We are talking about an equal material position here. White has the two bishops, but black has definite play against those weakened pawns. It is something that delicately balances each other out, and they repeat it here. I think they are both kind of content with this result. Adams making another draw in a tournament where he's clearly the underdog, and Grishuk, yeah, maintaining his +1 score with the black pieces here. It's not a bad decision at all. He has to get a win in the later stages of that tournament, because he has this he has to try to get to the third place in the overall standings of that Grand Chess Tour, because that would actually give him the entry card for next year's cycle of the Grand Chess Tour. But okay, in that game, would probably be the wrong moment to try for something fancy. Okay, let's go to check the next game. All right, this is Aronian Topalov. That's the next game. Topalov has one of his worst tournaments, I think, probably ever, being on -3. I would need to look it up. It's pretty terrible. He lost a bunch of games and didn't get to win a game. And he had chances like against Mickey Adams. Aronian, on the other hand, has made draw. So all draws. And looking forward to trying to win this game, probably. And playing some role in the overall standings. He has won the Singfield Cup, so if Aronian would get in like 2 wins in or so in the final couple of games, he had very decent chances to win that event and with it the tour. So c4. And Topalov goes with this quick d5. This is an interesting line for black, quite often played by dynamic players who have the Grünfeld in the repertoire. Why is that? Because if white takes, and this is what happened here, if white now goes d4, which is one of the main moves, then black can easily think about taking, and with g6 it could easily transpose to a Grünfeld. It's at least Grünfeldish, let's say. This is a pure Grünfeld, but white might also go here or something and stay within the English opening, but it has a definite Grünfeld flavor. Aronian goes e4, however, and this is an interesting move. That's maybe the sharpest move available in the position. The reason is that after knight b4, bishop c4, check. Black gets a check-in. This is the reason why this is so sharp. Now white absolutely does not want to capture. Yeah? Here this makes a pretty awkward impression. Black has an excellent development. White has a good development, but he cannot castle. Black has lost time. But without castling, how do you play this? Yeah, this is a super annoying piece. So king e2 is the move.
Check.
Check. And back. Yeah, why this kind of route? The knight is supposed to control d4. And if white has not, white does not get d4 in, then it will be difficult, really difficult, to coordinate the position. How is white going to do that? There have been a couple of tries in this position. One is knight e5, for example, after which black should absolutely avoid this, knight f7, and yeah, black gets killed. Very tricky line, something like this.
Check.
Queen b3.
Check.
And d4. Yeah, that's not going to end well. Yeah, some tricky lines. But what Aronian plays is the main move, actually, b4. Looks a bit strange. What is this? It's a kind of, a little bit like the Sicilian wing gambit. Yeah, you try to give the b pawn against the c pawn and establish a central dominance. The main move here, actually, is the move g6. But it was not played by Topalov. After g6, takes bishop g7. Black tries to establish, drawing badly here, establish a bind on d4, which very often leads to very sharp play. White, for example, can try to go with this, but his whole center here is pretty shaky. Topalov took the pawn, however, possible. Now, knight e2 is the most common move nowadays. But Aronian goes for knight d5. He definitely has something prepared here. g6 and d4. Yeah, white could have played bishop b2, I'm sorry. But that after bishop g7 would probably just lead to trades. And it's not clear that this is in white's best interest. Something like this, for example, is just a bit lame. Yeah, white gets the pawn back. But he has this weird king on f1 and his center is not really impressive. What white wants to do is he wants to build up something like we see here. He's got all pieces out, everything is centralized, and the center cannot easily be attacked. It's a pawn down, of course, yeah, but white has a great central compensation. The thing that's not quite right is that the king is here, of course. But sometimes you got h4, so we'll see what happens. Queen d2, queen a5, h4. Queen a5 is actually a move that is pretty heavily criticized, if you want, by the computer. engines tend to play something like rook c8 here and just trying to develop, but this gives up that pawn. And this is not an easy thing to do. You've got this pawn, and you definitely have the desire to win a game, as Topalov certainly has after that rotten first part of the event. So not quite sure if you want to return the pawn that easily. An interesting point is that if white actually decides to take, then here that move b5 is pretty strong. Very nice idea. After takes,
check,
takes black castles and has excellent compensation for the pawn. With this kind of operation, black makes sure that the queen side and the play against the center gets opened up, and white still needs a little bit of sorting out to do with the king on f1 and the rook on h1. Seems very okay for black. This is what Topalov played. It looks like a normal move, but it seems to be risky. After h4 there's the threat of h5. He played rook c8 and ignored this, because if h5, then there are ideas like b3 here. Interesting little tactic. This for example. Bishop b3 was simply preventing the whole thing.
check,
Queen b5 check. And h6. That's an interesting idea. Topalov wants to he prepares what he does next. Let's say king h2. Now threatening to get the rook to d1 and continue to play. White is not out for a quick mate, or some kind of crazy h-file attack or something like that. He is mostly just centralizing and trying to play for a dominance in the middle of the board. What does black do here? Topalov went g5, typically aggressive move of it's trademark kind of chess, playing aggressively. It is, however, very tricky to play for black, because white does not have to take. We should look at this quickly.
check,
If takes, then all of a sudden the rook gets into the game with check, and this cannot be in white's interest. Rook d1, just played by Aronian. Calmly just centralizing. And here Topalov decided to go g4. That's probably what he has to do. He didn't do that. I'm sorry. He does the next move. I wasn't seeing that right. This is what he probably should have done. This is what I wanted to say. And he didn't do it. After g4, white's knight is attacked, and he will go to e5. Not to a passive square. This is not a good idea. Black can take. Well, even that is interesting. But this is, I'm sorry, g4, knight e5. This is the far more interesting move. And also, far more aggressive. So this is why it should be played. Black now probably has to take. And now rook c8,
check,
bishop c8, d5. Black is able to grab another pawn, which he probably should take. And then g3. So black is 2 pawns up now. But to play this position is absolutely no fun. I'm not sure how bad it is. I mean, white seems to have a very good game, but how bad it actually is hard to tell. One thing is clear. If he castles, which after a while is given as the b6, and bishop f4. This is a key line. In this kind of line, black is in serious trouble. This is given as the best line by the end. This is why I mentioned castles. And after knight d7, king here, knight d5, white is of course a lot better. This is the relatively best line that the computers seem to find. And if this is the relatively best, black is in a bad way. It's tough to say what exactly went wrong here. This g5 approach, queen a5, probably everything is kind of piling up a little bit on black here. It's very difficult to play in the practical game, and probably objectively also tricky. This is played by Topalov, and it might not be that terrible, but the way it turned out after king g1, and now he went rook d8, maybe here there was a a way to improve. The the engines like this capture a little bit more, even though this is not easy to play. Note that the king is sort of, it's kind of stuck there on f8. And after knight h4, white also has an attack. It's very difficult to give him some advice. Like here, how does that continue? We can have a look there. Takes. And now rook c4 is a pretty strong move, attacking this. Black retreats. There's knight e7. Yeah, white's position is just immensely active, and black is uncoordinated. He at the end played rook d8, but now after the double capture, white is just in excellent shape. He got his pawn back, and with equal material now he will just attack. Note how badly placed that knight is on e6. It's totally clogging up the whole game. He now captured on g5, queen g5, and played bishop h6. However, after the queen retreated, we saw that there is a pin here. Bishop g7, queen f4, again this, and knight g5. This is the point, f7. What is black supposed to do? If he plays f6, white is just able to take. Yeah, he decided to capture, and after queen takes, he resigned the game. Topalov did. He does not have a decent answer to the idea rook takes c6, with white crashing through on e7, like rook c8 for example. Rook takes,
check,
takes,
check,
and this is a
check.
total disaster. Yeah, this is a real nightmare event for Topalov. He has lost now, I think it's really 4 games, if I'm not mistaken. And it doesn't seem to, it just doesn't get any better. Yeah, he just has a bad round after round after round. Aronian now with his first win, which means that he's in contention to win that event with this. It seems modest, +1 score, but it's enough to be close to the lead. Yeah, Giri was leading with +1, as was MBL and Grishuk. So let's continue with the final game to look at for round 7, and this is the big one, Carlsen Nakamura. Yeah, that's a really important game. Carlsen is on 50% after 6 rounds, and he has to win something to have a chance to win the event and the tour. And Nakamura is on +1, and if he, it's difficult, but if he wins with black against Carlsen, he would have excellent chances to win the whole event. So I'm actually doing something crazy. Yeah, I forgot to cover a game. I'm still doing this now. Yeah, I had to do Haaland MBL, but let's do that afterwards. It doesn't matter. This should have been the last game, but I'm kind of confused a little bit because of my weird schedule today. Okay, so if Nakamura would win this, he would go to +2 and have fantastic chances to win the overall thing even. So super important game. Why is it so tough for Nakamura to win with black? Well, he never beat Carlsen, so we'll see what happens in this game. Slav defense with bishop g4. This bishop g4 move is something that Nakamura has not yet played against Carlsen, at least not in classical chess. He mostly, there was a game with bishop f5 that Carlsen won very nicely last year in the Gashimov Memorial. So this is Nakamura's deviation from the game. h3, bishop h5, and this capture here. It doesn't look like much for white, but it is a way of getting a game, as they often say. It's not a theoretically very demanding position, but you get to have a complex kind of game with many pieces on the board. This is what white is doing, posting the knight up to e5 and then grabbing the bishop pair. Okay, why the knight from f and not the b knight? This is the thing. after h4. White is threatening h5, winning a piece actually, trapping that bishop, and this is very awkward for black. He has no good move now. If he has to play something like h5, you might as well resign the game. So this is correct. White took, bishop g2, knight c6, and e4. Carlsen wants to open up the position for his two bishops. Certainly a logical choice. Taken.
Check.
And check. Why not? Develop with check. Accelerate castling. Knight b6. This attacks the pawn and was just ignored by Carlsen. It's a very interesting moment now in the game because Nakamura now has a very principled choice. He can play as he did. He castled. And he did so rather quickly. He also could have taken on d4. And this doesn't have very clear consequences. It is clear, however, that white has some compensation for the pawn, but it is not a clear scenario at all. For example, what could have happened? White could have played here. Just, oops, that was a mouse slip. Just going for a position like that, where white has two bishops against two knights and very active bishops. So this looks like some compensation. For example, a move like rook b1, putting pressure here, intending to push the c pawn or the a pawn, is definitely something that white can play with. White also can consider to take on b7. This is a very, very sharp move, of course. After rook takes, black has ideas here. For example, queen c7, attacking that bishop and threatening mate. King g2 is a good move now, attacking here. And this is a position that
check
is absolutely difficult to assess. White is an exchange up for a pawn, but it's a total mess. Yeah, note that
check.
This is not good. Rook has no decent square. Very complicated, but this was possible for Nakamura maybe. He decided to castle, however. And the thing is, now after d5, takes, the situation in the center is clarified, and white just has the pure bishop pair in an open position without any kind of compensation. Of course, it is a symmetrical kind of pawn distribution. It's 2 against 2 on the queen side and 3 against 3 on the king side, which is of course helping the defending side with the bishops. However, still, he basically said, okay, I'm going to play a long game with you and I'm going to hold this draw. Yeah, let's see what happens. Queen f6. Got traded. Bishop to f4. Rook to d8. Yeah, all looks very normal. Rook d1. Yeah, and now, very interesting moment here in this game. Nakamura now decided to kill this bishop, this knight there on c3. Give up his last remaining bishop and playing with 2 knights against 2 bishops. Was that necessary? Probably not. He also could have played differently. Something like knight c4 was interesting, for example. However, after b3, white also seems to be a little bit more comfortable. Knight b2, for example, white will take and centralize. And it's not clear that this helped at all. Yeah, the knight looks a little bit misplaced there. Something like this is probably not helping black. He decided to take a tough decision, a very tough decision, but I think one idea that he certainly had was that here, okay, he has that counterplay here against the pawns, but also the pawn structure that white has is not ideal with a2 and c4. Black also has the open file, so maybe he also was thinking that there are chances that he wins one of the pawns, but that did not happen. Carlsen was playing this in a very circumspect way, not dropping any pawns and just playing in the most precise way so that the rook ultimately had to go back. Yeah, knight has to be brought back so that it gets not captured or anything. c5, rook d2. Note how Carlsen managed to push Nakamura's pieces back. Yeah, it was an active position for black. It looked active, but now he's back on the final 3 ranks. So we get the pure endgame. 2 bishops against 2 knights. When we were talking in the broadcast, Grandmaster Yarmolinsky very firmly stated that it is a clear case where white wants to trade the rook to make more of his pure bishop's advantage against the knights. I was a bit surprised about that, but okay, well, I learned, I mean, I knew before, but in that session it was totally clear who is the better endgame player. Of course, here white has no chance at all to avoid the rook trade, but I would have thought that maybe keeping more material would help the bishops, but this is really wrong. Here, the advantage of the bishop pair is just very, very substantial. Why? With the bishop pair, you can here play on both sides of the board. White can make progress on the king side, trying to sort of find some entry there for the king, but he can also always operate with the bishops on areas of the queen side. Sometimes it is a simple capture that is the key idea. For example, if we look here after king f8, in a situation, if we just do this, which is not super clever maybe, but I just want to show the general idea. Sometimes something simple like this capture can be awkward for black because that knight has no squares covered, and sometimes you can even cover this square. So the power of the bishop pair is sometimes just in the fact that it can capture the knights, whereas the other way around, it is often not possible. I mean, if the knight attacks the bishop, it just moves away, but sometimes the knight can just not move away. Yeah, it's just the nature of this type of position. So how did Carlsen continue? He went f4, a move that he wasn't entirely happy with. Afterwards, I saw just a minute or so of the press conference or the post-game interview, and he stated that he probably should have waited with that decision, and something like this and bishop to d6 was a good alternative. Yes, certainly, this is what we had expected during the broadcast, but I'm not sure that f4 is bad at all. And now, an absolute key moment, it is move 41. Carlsen now has more time on the clock. They now play with 1 second, no, not 1 minute, 1 hour for the rest of the game, plus a 30-second increment. Carlsen now has to decide how to set up his pawn formation. I expected the move g5 here, and this is probably not such a great idea. I expected. It was something that I would have considered, let's say. My point being that I would want to make this possible, and in some cases it's maybe possible to get in something like f5, white recaptures with the bishop, let's say, and then h4, h5, h6 would be a passer on the h file. These were ideas that I had, but Carlsen played the move after long thought of f5, and this was exactly what Grandmaster Yarmolinsky also had expected. He said that this was the standard way to play this kind of thing. It surprised me because the pawn structure now seems very static, but white has excellent chances now to make progress with his pieces. The king can come up all the way to g5, which makes the h-pawn push possible, and in general he has opened up the position more so that bishop can come here and so on. It is a definitely difficult position for Nakamura to hold, but he did a very good job for a long time. King d7, king f4, knight e8, king g5. It's not so clear that this is threatening something, but it looks still it looks dangerous. Bishop f4, a6. That is not a necessary move and was criticized by Carlsen, but it's hard to tell. I really have to say I cannot tell. It didn't seem very necessary to us during the broadcast, but we also couldn't really figure out why it should be so terrible. h4, king back, bishop g3. A couple of interesting possibilities, of course. One interesting idea in this position was this check on d6. Something that is interesting. If, or we can also, let's look at this first. Knight d6 and now bishop c6. The question is that a win? Knight f5, oops. And here, threatening knight to e6. It seems questionable that this should be a win, because if we look at this,
check.
We definitely see that this knight will be able to sacrifice itself against the a pawn, after which the h pawn is the wrong pawn. It's a dark squared corner and a light squared bishop. One possibility. Bishop g3, a waiting move. Knight back.
Check.
Check. And here. Knight d7. That was Nakamura's setup to try to hold this. Knights on c6 and knight on d7. So we've got some shuffling and h5. It seems that white has to go for that h pawn push. As I think Magnus also stated later, he felt that he needed to dislodge that knight position, that it's not so stable anymore. And
check.
One thing is clear.
Check.
They repeat it here.
Check.
And this was forced. However, starting around here, you can definitely question what Nakamura is doing. We get one particular position after which the game is probably lost, but it's difficult to say when we reach the point where you cannot save it anymore. I'm not really sure that it was lost in the first place, but this is the moment where my time constraint today is showing. I really would have liked to know better what went wrong there for Naka. We can look at how it went, so that you see what I'm talking about. He gave that check now. He didn't want to stay passive. I mean, he could have tried to go back, but this is an entirely passive kind of setup. And this is in fact a Zugzwang. Look at this. This is why a bishop is quite often better than a knight. And that's it. Complete Zugzwang. So he couldn't even go back. This is why he went for this. And we felt that black now it's critical. It's definitely critical. But here, interesting, it's a counter attack. If white now takes here, then this is going to be perfectly okay for him. This is why bishop e4 was played. Now this, back, and bishop f4. Yeah, of course, Carlsen does not want a repetition. This is the stronger move, bishop f4, just keeping the tension. And this is the moment, I think after f6, it's losing. And this is what Nakamura played. I think Carlsen also said that f6, he felt after that he should definitely win. But it's tough to give black a clear advice what he should do. If black tries to sorry, attack that bishop, we go to b8, something like this, bishop d3, and this is the idea now. f6. Is that winning for white? It's tough to say. It's really tough to say. Of course, it is yeah, absolutely no fun to play that with black. But are you losing? Yeah, I'm just making a couple of moves to see how it might unfold. It's not a clear picture to me. Maybe if you look longer with an engine, you can find out. Even though you have to be very cautious there. There are many endgames of that type where the engine gives white, in this case it's white, a huge advantage due to the bishop pair, and still there are some freaky fortresses that will hold despite a pawn down and against bishops. It's not totally clear to me if Nakamura could have saved, but after f6 he is lost, and there's no way to save it now. However, the reason why it is lost is something we'll see. Yeah, it's really crazy. Okay, bishop e4, knight f2, back and back and back. And now, of course, Carlsen goes for it. Bishop takes b7. And now, what was the big idea of all that? If black now takes on f5, let's start with the easy move, then king f6 will just win the game pretty easily. That knight is hanging, it doesn't have a great square. Yeah, let's say here it, yeah, I mean, this is going to, no, that knight g4, I'm sorry. But c6 probably. This is probably going to do it. And other squares, yeah, I mean, you can, what can you do here? You can try this, but
check.
Yeah, white does this and that and gets a piece. That doesn't help at all. Nakamura's idea was this, and it makes an awful lot of sense. Attacks, attacks, attacks. So what did Carlsen do now? Magnus just took on f6, and this is the move of the game and probably the move of the tournament. Yeah, the great idea is that after knight takes f4, and that's the only thing that puts up some kind of resistance, he's got king e5, and he's double attacking the knights. The cool thing is that black doesn't have anything great now that he can play. If he goes knight to e2, let's start with this one, then bishop a6 is a very nice illustration of why two knights that protect each other are often a problem. e2 knight cannot move because of his colleague on d4 and this on f4, and f4 knight also cannot move as e2 is hanging. Here white just wins because he's essentially playing with 3 extra pawns. Black is completely paralyzed. So he had to go knight f2 e2. This is a much tougher choice. Yeah, f6 played by Carlsen. The engines claim that c6 is quicker, better, whatever, but f6 does win as well. But what he had to see is the following point: a5, a4, king f7, check, king back. And now, why is that position good for white in the first place? Those knights, as I said, they are tied to one another. They absolutely don't harmonize at all. And white has got a c and an f pawn that both can threaten to promote. The black king alone cannot stop both pawns. That's impossible. So in a way, white is playing with extra material here. In spite, on paper, he's a piece down. The thing is, however, that here there is only one way that will win absolutely convincingly. That was found by Carlsen, which is remarkable. It's a second great move of that game. I mean, he played a couple of good moves, but this is just excellent. King to e4. What is the point? The point is that again, black has a tough time to move any of his knights, and what white is threatening is king e3 and bishop c4, and then he will win one knight for nothing because of that miserable state that those pieces are in. Yeah, black has absolutely no defense against this double threat. He can also start with bishop c4 and then go king e3. He tried this, but now c6 is going to be quick.
Check.
Check here. Yeah, something like this is just going to promote.
Check.
So check, king e5, and this was tried. If he takes on d5, white just takes, and black is in no position to save this. If he goes
Check.
with this, he is of course far too late, or just about too late. This is what he tried, and now, oops, double attack. That's a way to lose a game. Yeah, knight b6, and there it goes. c7, king up, and here after bishop takes a4, Nakamura resigned the game, and this gets Carlsen to a +1 score in the event and to a +12 score without a loss against Nakamura. So Carlsen is on the, yeah, he's on the scoreboard in a way. Yeah, I mean, he had scored draws, but it's a win finally after 6 draws, and that means he has chances again to win that event and maybe win the overall tour still, even though he has not convinced at all yet in the first 2 tournaments, and not so much in this event. This was a great game though, grinding out that win, the in a way typical Carlsen game, but he hadn't really shown his endgame magic yet in this tournament. Nakamura, however, has lost again to his rival and is falling back to a 50% score in the event, which is a huge setback. He was leading the overall standings of the tour, but with that loss will be very difficult to come back from. Okay, I had skipped one game. I'm sorry, and I'm going to, of course, cover it because it was very interesting. It was Aronian against MVL. Let's load it. Okay. No Berlin, by the way. Yeah, MVL is a night off player, but it was a Berlin free round. Yeah, why not? Okay, so we have a knight off, and MVL goes with this e5 setup. And this is what Vichy is going for, a somewhat slow strategic line focused on centralizing and developing. No quick attacks, nothing crazy. b5, dynamic move, attacking the center here on c4. White cannot take twice as e4 is dropping, and here black is much more comfortable with his 2 center pawns against 2 flank pawns that are far back. This is the far more prudent choice, and now we have a transformation. After knight c5, white is forced to take, and here we have an interesting situation. It's opposite colored bishops, which does not mean that it's kind of drawish. No, not at all. It means that both sides have one color complex that they can play on. So black often wants to play on some kind of dark squares, and white wants to use light squares if possible. For example, something like, it's okay, let's do a black move here. That is what MVL did, and Anna now castled, which is fine. Something that's still like a4. Yeah, white would absolutely love for black to play b4 so that they can use here the light squares. Bishop on c4 maybe, attacking that pawn. White wants to use or get to some kind of light squared dominance, and the same applies to black, just with the dark squares. Okay, of course, Aronian castled, knight d6, knight going to that strong blockading square in front of the pawn, where it stops the pawn but also puts some pressure on the pawn. a4, that was part of the agenda, of course, and now a good move here by Maxime, bishop g5, Just trying to maybe take and take. Okay. And now, very interesting concept. He does not retreat at all or play some other passive move. He goes to f4. And the big idea is that if white now tries to harass that bishop, he has that counter blow, f5. Very nice job here by black. Yeah, if white takes, oops, there's e4. And white will lose material. Very funny situation. That, of course, also is not acceptable for white. So Arnold just took on b5. Still f5. That's a funny move. But very aggressively played. And if you play passively in this kind of opening, it's rarely a good idea. White now has to go knight d2. There's no big choice. Otherwise, you cannot keep the e4 pawn and control over that. Knight d2. The next move, however, by MVL is a mistake. He can play something normal here, let's say, like a takes b5, and the position is equal in a very dynamic sense, let's say. Yeah? White can take here, and then black plays something like this, for example, trying to go for c4. Very sharp position. Black has given a pawn, but a pawn that he very likely will get back at some point. White can go knight e4 at some stage, but black always has this c4 push. So it's a very tough to play position. Probably with equal chances, but it's not like a boring draw or anything. So this is what he should have done. But he played queen g5. Very aggressive looking move. But right after this move, we see why Arnold is not doing well in this event. He simply somehow lacks his tactical sharpness. Yeah? He plays now, after some thought, the move rook a1, like 6 minutes. And this is just a very, very passive move. And it's quite mysterious what made him avoid the move knight c4. That was already suggested by Yamo in the broadcast, and we couldn't really find, we only looked at it very quickly because we had some other action to follow. But we couldn't understand why Vichy was not doing this. It's just by far better than rook a1. One point here is that after f takes, white has queen h3, and he has that invasion idea. And here, white is better here. It's just white being better. Black's pieces now look a little bit awkward here. For example, knight b5, there is knight b6. This is also sometimes a possibility. Yeah, here white is better. If he takes with the knight on e4, white will capture on a6. And this looks a little bit threatening to white, but there is no substantial threat available. A pawn on a6 is going to be far more dangerous. And don't forget, there are two of them. Two passes. Yeah, knight c4 here was just better for Arnold, but he went here. And after this now, black is in good shape. The rook is all of a sudden of an open file, and it's a file that black controls. So a very mysterious choice why Arnold felt that he had to go for that. E takes f5 and rook a3. See how active black has become. Knight e4. And now, of course, the great reply, c4. Yeah, black does not want to take also. This is just very meek in comparison. This is just far more aggressive. So if white now takes the queen, black captures, and essentially two pieces are hanging. Not playable. White has to probably move the queen. And here the engine still suggests ways for white to hold. But I mean, he has to do that. It's just like what he did loses right away. But this is a weird line. I can show it anyway. Like this. Threatening mate. G3. Rook takes and queen back. This is what the engines give. And they give white a decent position. Quite funny. White is not material down at the moment. It's equal. And the thing is that if those get traded, the knights, then the d pawn can be a factor. For example, after this, the move f6 is interesting, attacking that knight. And if the knights get traded, then the d pawn is very, very threatening to black. Yeah, note that there are some problems with coordination here, like here and a possible d6. There's also the threat of bishop c4. Not that black is losing, but white has definite counter chances. This is what he had to do. Instead, he went to c2, and this is, again, kind of mysterious because queen f5 is the most obvious move there, and white does not have any reply to that. If he tries to do this to cover here, there's rook b3, and this is just not good, yeah? This is also a threat, like this and this, because after pawn takes, queen h3, white's king is going to get mated. Yeah, stuff like this is the issue. Yeah, very mysterious game here by Vichy. After queen takes f5, he played queen b2, rook b3, and now decided to sack the queen. He had queen and knight hanging on e4. The thing is, this is just lost. But it had some interesting points. This thing happened. And doesn't that look somewhat threatening to black? Yeah. Queen is attacked. Rook is attacked on f8. And the bishop on f4 is also, yeah, looked at. But black has a direct win. Check. Yeah, and now very brutal finish here. Bam. Rook takes f2. Yeah, just killing the whole game off. If white takes here now, we just recapture. And black has a completely winning position. The b pawn is just far too much. If he avoids the instant capture, then something like this and this is going to decide the day. He has no way to stop the pawns. It's just absolutely impossible. Yeah, is there something else that you can suggest? This move? That was played by Vichy. And we got really scared for one moment there when we saw the move. Knight f7 check. That's kind of crazy. And many pieces are hanging. But MVL, Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, he had calculated all that beforehand, and he played that move. Just calm, bishop g3. And it does win. It really does win. If white takes on d6 now,
check.
This is happening, and this is a promotion. Note that the e4 pawn is taking away the important square of the bishop. So rook d6 does not work, and if white checks, we just take it. Bishop takes.
Check.
It's going to be mate. And if white takes here, of course. Oops, I'm sorry.
Check.
And again, he cannot stop the pawn. Yeah, what is left there for white? Nothing. Vichy resigned. So a tough loss for Aronian in that game after he had lost to Grishuk in the round before. And it was a bad performance in this game as well. So he doesn't seem to be in good shape at all, losing the second game in a row. It also gets Maxime Vachier-Lagrave to a great score of +2, which is the lead in the event. Yeah, the first player to have won 2 games and now having the sole lead. Ahead of a couple of players with +1, Giri, Grishuk, Carlsen and Aronian. So a super close call, that event. And we have seen some interesting chess in this round. No balance, but many other interesting opening choices and also very interesting endgames, and especially that Carlsen Nakamura endgame that you can definitely explore a lot deeper than I did now in this rather short video. Okay, I hope you enjoyed the coverage of round 7. I'll be back shortly with round 8. Thanks for watching.